Good evening. Welcome to the regular meeting of Tuesday, May 28th, 2024 of the City Council. We'll call this meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Roll call, please, Ms. Clerk.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Claudia Arona.
Here.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Here.
Mayor Infante.
Here.
Thank you.
Frank Smithen, sir, if you would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Everyone, please put your hand over your heart and repeat after me.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. We don't have any of those. We're going to have a presentation, I believe, Mr. Murphy. Right?
Yes, we do. Margaret Weiss, forgive me if I mispronounce that, is here to talk about the master plan for aging, and we have a slide presentation. So if you want to step up to the microphone here and take it away and tell me when to advance the slides, and I'll do it for you.
Fantastic. My colleague's going to join me, and she'll introduce herself in a few moments. Hello, everybody. I'm Margaret Weiss, and as you said, I am the coordinator for the Master Plan for Aging, and you can go ahead and put up the first slide if you like. I believe, Mayor Infante, I think you've heard my spiel a little bit about what is the Master Plan at SB CAG, Maybe not.
Yes, I was at SBCAG and heard
But
that.
I'm very
But
glad
Thank you
you-
for being here again.
Well, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to let the rest of the council know about the project and staff and members of the audience. And we really appreciate your giving us the time to do this evening. So goals for tonight, I really just want to give you kind of a brief overview of what this is. It's happening in Santa Barbara County in all of our communities and what the opportunities are for each city within the county. And I'm going to conclude with two asks, so I'll give you a heads up right away what they are. Essentially, one opportunity within the plan is for each city to take a designation of a program called Age-Friendly Communities. And it is not by any means a requirement or anything that I am pushing on people, but it is an opportunity while we're in this process because we can assist with it. So I'll tell you a little bit more about that, and you can decide at a later date if it's something that is the right time and the right project for Solvang. And the other ask is that as part of our project, we will be doing a pretty in-depth community assessment of the needs and interests of older adults and all the people associated with them. So it's really important, I think, to get good representation from Solvang. And so that's something that I would like us to work together on if we can. Let's go ahead to the next slide. I need a little coaxing sometimes, huh? The master plan launched in California in 2021, and it is a blueprint for aging across the lifespan. It's not only for the older adults, but for all the people that surround their lives and for all of us who want to continue aging and become an older adult. So it really impacts all of us. And California is being considered a leader in making this effort. Other states across the country are watching what we're doing and what succeeds and what doesn't succeed. To me, the two things that are most important for us to know are, one, like I say, the things that are built into the plan are not only for older people, they will truly benefit the entire community. And we'll get into a little detail about that tonight. And two, if we create a strong action plan now, that is going to benefit us in the future as more resources come down the pipeline. If we have a strategic plan in place and we're ready to tee it up as new grants and new funding opportunities make themselves available, that is really going to be an advantage for us, each of the city communities and the county as well. And I have to admit that I feel a little funny talking about new funding coming down the pipeline, knowing what the budget situation looks like right now for all of us. But, you know, you've been here, you know how that works. It's bad today, it won't always be bad. But I know that it's a rough process right now. Next slide, please. So the master plan has 5 huge goals. One is housing for all stages and all ages. Housing that's appropriate for people as they age, so they can age in place. Health reimagined, so people can get the services that they need. Inclusion and equity, and where older adults are concerned, that means that they're not isolated, that they remain in connection with the community. Caregiving that works, which is one of our really big challenges. And affordability of aging. So, huge goals. Each one has multiple strategies, multiple initiatives. Let me give you an example. The housing goal also includes things like transportation. How do you get from your home to the places you need to go? Emergency response. How do you get help at your home when you need it? Are there outdoor spaces where people can be active and meet their friends and experience a little bit of sunshine? And even climate resilience is considered a part of the housing goals. So you can see what I mean when I talk about these being really huge goals. And we know that we're not going to fix all of that in a short period of time in our action plan. We're looking to figure out what are the best small steps that we can begin with and lay the groundwork that way towards an ongoing plan that will, over time, address more and more. But baby steps to start with. Next slide, please. So already a lot has been accomplished. As I said, the plan started in 2021, and this is a big number. There has been an investment of $9.5 billion in services for seniors and people with disabilities. Some of them are listed here on the screen. These are all things that have been considered really critical needs for older adults and people who are aging. Part of our goal is to take what the state is already doing it and leverage it locally in the most effective way that we can. Next slide. So all of those things that I just mentioned were statewide initiatives. Locally, we have a partnership, a group called the Adult and Aging Network, AAN, we refer to it. And AAN started in 1999. They've been working on senior issues all through those years. And when the Master Plan for Aging was announced, they began to address in small ways some of those 5 bold goals. And then last year, a very small sum of money came down from the state to create a local plan. 15 counties were selected to do that, and we were one of the 15. And so we are now working on our own strategic master plan for aging that really looks at what our local needs are. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I could spend an hour and a half or 2 hours going over data, and I don't want to do that tonight, and you don't want me to do that. But I want to give you at least a glimpse of why we're doing all of this. And the data is pretty compelling. We expect that we'll have 1 in 4 people over the age of 60 by the year 2030, which is like tomorrow, right? And just to kind of put that in perspective, that represents a doubling of the population of older adults since 2010. So it's a huge demographic shift, and honestly, we're not really ready for it. We don't really have the resources in place that we need. That's why we're doing this work. We know that in that population of people over the age of 60, 1 in 3 struggle with poverty. 1 in 3 live with a disability. 1 in 5 have a chance of developing dementia. 7 in 10 will need help at home or in a facility. They'll need some kind of supportive services. And I don't have to tell you the concerns about housing, how difficult it is for anyone, in particular an older adult or a disabled person at this point in time. Next slide, please. By the way, that data, I have not looked up the numbers for Solvang, but I learned that in general in the county, in our tourism industry, 1 in 3 tourists are also older adults. So many of the things that we talk about, that I'm going to talk about here with age-friendly communities, are actually things that will also benefit our visitors as well as our residents. So all of that data is really it can be a little overwhelming, but there are some things that we can do, some basic steps that we can take. And there are some successful models that we can build on. And one of them is the age-friendly communities. It's a model that's done in a number of different ways, but one of the methods is through a specific program offered by AARP, the American Association of Retired Persons. And they have a strategy and protocols and support for communities who would like to have that designation. And then it's something that you can use in, a variety of different ways to promote, if you choose, that you're an age-friendly community. Most of the age-friendly communities feature things that are actually good for people of all ages, like walkable neighborhoods, a variety of transportation options, access to quality services, opportunities to engage in community activities, housing that's at least reasonably affordable and adaptable. And, as planners and decision makers, these are all things that you have some influence over. Some of them are pretty big. They're not things that are going to happen overnight. But as I say, the bonus is that all of these things benefit all ages. We think of them as things that are necessary for aging in place. But when surveys are done of families and what they are interested in, it's the same. And one of the examples that is often cited are curb ramps. And some of you will know this. Curb ramps came around after World War II to provide access for people in wheelchairs. And it was something that was done with veterans in mind, largely. Well, who else benefits from curb ramps? When I was a mom pushing a stroller, I thought they were pretty great. That was a while ago. But it benefits in a lot of other ways. It benefits people whose knees are a little achy and they're not in a wheelchair, but it's an easier way to get up and down a curb. So all of these things are really great for all ages. Let's go to the next slide. No, this is good. This is good, sorry. So what AARP does in their program is they provide kind of a roadmap of how to go about this. And one of the things that I really like about the AARP program is, although they provide a roadmap and some resources, it's really up to each community what they want to do. It doesn't have to be a grandiose measure. It can be a very simple thing. For example, here, where you've got big changes coming in your senior center, that might be something to tie to an age-friendly community where your action plan is going to be to let the community know about those changes and the new opportunities that will be available to them. And I know you're just getting ready to break ground on that. So, maybe that's not the opportune time. Maybe it'll be a year from now. But this is, I think, an option to keep in the back of your mind for something that might benefit the city. And all of those little steps matter. Let's go to the next slide, which tells you a little bit about the AARP process, in case this is something that you decide you're interested in. Joining the network is fairly easy. They have a simple application, and they require a letter of commitment. And while we're working on the master plan for aging, that's something we can assist with, although it is really straightforward. You would not have difficulty getting that done. Where we really can assist is in the first year when you're required to conduct a community needs assessment, because we are required to do that, and we will already be doing that. And so that is something that we can essentially do for you, or certainly with you, to get you on your way to, as, for example, one of the things that often comes up in a community needs assessment is people know there's resources out there, but they have no idea who to call. And Dee will tell you, we actually have a few key places that a senior can call to help guide them through the process of staying in their home, getting caregivers, getting what assistance they need. So I have seen communities where their entire action plan is an outreach message to let people know who to call. And that's actually a great action plan. It doesn't have to be grandiose. And then the idea is that the plan continues. Create a plan, put it in place, take a look at it, see how well it worked, and come up with some tweaks or something new that you want to do in future years. Let's go to the next slide. These are some of the benefits that you get with the AARP program. The things that I like to point out are the two bold items at the bottom. 68% of the communities that have signed on with them have actually enacted some kind of a policy change that they chose. And 86% have overcome some kind of a barrier. So their program is working, and their program has been in place for many years. It's a really good tool, and they provide with a lot of expert guidance, resources, webinars, technical assistance, on and on. You know, they are very well resourced themselves. And so they're in a good position to support this kind of effort, including some small grants for their members. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I feel a little bit like I'm an AARP saleswoman, and I am not. But another arm of their project is they do provide us with some good data. And I promise to share this data with you tonight. And you all have a more in-depth report. But this is just a very high-level look at that report. So they have indexed every community in the country. And they use national indicators so that it really is comparable from one location to another. And the overall score for Solvang is 62. That, it may surprise you, but that is an excellent score. You know, when we were in school and we got a 62, that was like a failing grade, right? Not here. Here, where you want to be is above the median, and you can see that the median here is 48. So Solvang is doing well above the median and actually is the highest scoring city in our county. So congrats to you for that. They use these 7 categories: housing, neighborhood, transportation, environment, health, engagement, and opportunity to rank you. They have many different metrics within each one of those, and the paper report will delve deeper into those details. And if you're curious about how they get their metrics, if you go online, you can dive even deeper into each one. But it's a good score. And I'm just taking a quick look here to see if I gave you another slide. Yes, let's go ahead and look at the next slide, because that one breaks these categories down a little bit. And this may be a little hard to read, but I'll go through a couple of them. If you look at the highest score, you have got an 84 in the category of health. That is like knocking it out of that ballpark. That's your highest scored category. And it's really impressive. I can tell you a little bit about what went into that number. And I worked in healthcare for 30 years. So frankly, I'm surprised to see scores that high. Most of our county, the scores are pretty good in health, although yours is really, really top notch. I was surprised because you know, when you work in healthcare, you're aware of all of the flaws, right? And I would guess that there are people here who might feel like, I don't have such great access to my doctor. But it is an indicator of how we're doing compared to the rest of the country. As tough as it might be here, there's places that are worse in terms of accessing your healthcare provider or the kind of quality that you have. In general, the quality scores from patients here are quite high. Some of the other things that bring our scores up in California, California has strict policies about tobacco use and prevention, and that bumps up our score. As concerned as we are about obesity, California has better numbers in terms of obesity than many other states. So some of those kind of indicators that go sort of across the board help with that score. But you also have a very high score in engagement, which I think reflects all of the opportunities to do things in terms of civic engagement and social engagement and supportive neighbors and easily accessed parks and opportunities like that. So there's a lot that's already really doing well here. If I look at the lowest number, it's going to be housing. That probably is not a surprise to anybody. But I think you will maybe enjoy or appreciate going through the report in more detail than I'm going to spend your time on tonight. But it really does. It breaks down each of these categories into quite a bit of detail and lets you get a sense of what's working and what things maybe can be tweaked a little bit. So, for example, in housing, well, the biggest factor, of course, is cost. But one of the things that they rank us on, where I believe you actually do fairly well, is this is fascinating to me. It's such a detail. The percentage of homes that you can enter with 1 or 0 steps. So they're looking for places that are easily accessed by people who are older, have some mobility limitations. That's the kind of detail you're going to find in this report. So enjoy those numbers. It's great bedtime reading if you're having a little trouble getting to sleep. But it's really good information. You've got that report. We've also given you a couple of items with just some great local information that look like these. This is information that we've collected on our local Santa Barbara County older adult population. So it's in your packet for your reference as well. Do we have the last slide? Let's do that one. You've got this in your packet that gives you my contact information. And so at this point, I guess I will remind you of my 2 asks, and then I want to introduce my colleague. Let's think about what we can do to make sure that when we come around to do this community assessment, which is going to begin in July, we really are able to get good representation from Solvang. And then if the idea of the age-friendly community designation has any appeal, either for now or in the not-too-distant future, let me know that as well, and that's something that we can support you in. But that decision really comes from each community. I have a couple communities that are really interested because it suits where they are in their planning process for other things related to older adults. But it's got to be the right time for each community, and it may be now, it may be down the road. I do want to introduce my colleague. This is Deanne Rosenberry, and Dee and I have worked together on the caregiving aspect of our project, and she is a wealth of information for all things older adult. So I'll let her take a moment of your time as well.
Thanks, Margaret. Hi, everyone. I'm Dee Rosenberry, like Margaret said. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. Most importantly, I'm a lifelong Valley resident. I've been here forever. My dad worked at Vandenberg, so I've been here for a long time. Moved away to go to college, but who can leave this valley and stay away? So I just wanted to talk about a couple of things as a mental health professional. I also work at Family Service Agency, which is a nonprofit that we serve the county from cradle to the grave. My program is Senior Services. I'm the program director, so that's why we're here together. So I just wanted to lend my word of support for this program. As Margaret mentioned, 1 in 4 adults are going to be over the age of 60 by the year 2030, which is, like Margaret said, tomorrow. So imagine what the demographic used to look like. It used to be a pyramid. By 2030, 2050, 2060, we're going to be a pillar. So which means there's going to be as many younger folks as there will be older adults. So what are we going to do? There's not enough room now for people that are in that top little tier of the pyramid. So this is looking forward. This is being proactive. What are we going to do? What is this going to look like? So I just think and want to support that this master plan for aging and the age-friendly communities is going to help our community, help Solvang, help the San Ynez Valley as we move forward and watch our neighbors and ourselves, unfortunately, grow older. We need places to live, and an age-friendly community helps people stay in their homes, because that's the goal. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for your time. This is great. I love this valley so much as you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And one more thought I'd like to just share. Since I mentioned that I'm really interested in figuring out how to get this community assessment to capture Solvang's needs and experiences and opinions, I'm so happy to see Ellen Albertoni here in the audience tonight, because I've already got my sights on Ellen. I know we'll be able to collaborate on that community assessment. And I'm guessing that there's probably some other really great resources that you all know. Also, I'm open to just any questions that you might have for me.
Questions, anybody? Please.
How is your study going to be funded?
So we were one of the 15 counties that were funded to create this local plan, and part of that includes the community assessment that we'll be conducting. So it's grant funded from the California Department of Aging.
And you're doing the other cities, incorporated cities throughout the county?
We're trying to capture really a picture of the entire area, and also trying to drill down in very specific populations. Where we will actually be doing a deep dive, we'll do, in addition to the survey, maybe some focus groups. That I don't know yet. So that might be a specific community. It might be a specific need group like caregivers, or maybe a specific cultural group. But yes, the idea is to capture a picture of the whole county, and also to understand what the individual communities within it look like.
Okay. And finally, did you use other data besides AARP?
Oh, yes, I really should have talked about that a little bit. So in the 2 colorful handouts in your packet, those reflect a wide variety of data sources. And in fact, there, I don't think that we used AARP at all. It's more some of the local data that's available. Some data came from SBCAG, for example, or some of the state data sources as well.
Thank you.
Good question.
I'll make one comment. You said by 2030, 1 in 4 will be over 60. Last I read from a Santa Barbara County resource is we already have 1 in 4 that's over 65 in this city already. We don't have to wait for 2030, and we're going to be exceeding what you're already talking about as a goal. So,
I think you're absolutely right. I think Solvang probably has a slightly older population than, for example, Lompoc or Guadalupe or some of the other cities. So that would make sense to me, absolutely.
there's a couple of us up here that recognize age.
Me too.
You, him.
I'm with you.
Thank you.
Anything else, or any comments or suggestions for me, or anything related to the survey, the age-friendly designation? You know where to find me if you think of something.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
At this point in time, we have public communications for items that are not on the agenda. And we have some comments for not on the agenda. You're excellent. Let's start with Lansing Duncan. I haven't heard from Lansing in, a couple weeks.
Thank you. I fit right in with that demographic, too.
It's a lot of us like
And thank you for your presentation and efforts on the behalf of our overall aging community. We'll all benefit from that. I want to heartily recommend this book entitled Wildwood by Roger Deacon. It tells you a lot about the natural and human world. Unlike this wildwood, okay, that upends the natural world found on Site C and would adversely affect our community in so many different ways. By destroying all the highly visible wild trees on the developer's property and some more on the Mission Oaks property, building a road and parking cars atop the historic Mission Aqueduct, adversely affecting two critical intersections, and forever changing an important gateway to Solvang, this wildwood would be a travesty. A project consistent with the housing element, focused on the lower half of the property, would not have to cut down these venerable hilltop oaks that have graced Solvang's entry for more than a century. They can be seen in a 1928 aerial photo, and were well-established specimens then. The larger is easily 150 years old, and the arborist report lists it as 4 feet in diameter at breast height. Just in case you don't know what that might be, it's like that, right? So, although the report appears to question the vitality of a tree that has termites and cavities, it's far older than any human being living in Solvang. Speaking of aging, and the termites and cavities only add to its value for other life forms, such as insect eaters and cavity dwellers or nesters, and the raptors that roost on it. It's a biosphere unto itself. The only aspect of this wildwood that is wild is the callous disregard for the public planning process and the community's vision for development encompassed in the housing element. So I just have to compare this wildwood with what we might have on Site C. But wait, there is one other wild aspect to this project: the chaos it'll create on our streets with additional noise, dust, flooding, parking, and traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Lansing. Al Cortese?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I'm Al Cortese of Solvang. Tonight, I'd like to focus on an aspect of Dennis Beebe's excellent presentation at the last council meeting on the problems presented by inadequate parking for the grossly over-dense development at Site C. That aspect is traffic safety. We can all recognize that proper parking management can help improve traffic flows, increase safety, and promote economic activity, making it an essential component of any well-functioning community. Of course, we all want Solvang to be a well-functioning community. But most important is the fact that proper parking management helps improve traffic flow and increases safety. One glance at the exhibits attached by Mr. Beebe to his presentation at the last council meeting shows all of the parking spaces that would be taken up by a realistic assessment of the number of cars that will be attracted to a development such as this. Realistic assessments of the number of cars per unit, indeed as required by the municipal code, will cover every available space along Alamo Pintado, Old Mission, and Hillside, as well as both sides of the development's proposed entry-exit driveway, reducing all but Alamo Pintado to approximately 1 lane. As I've said at past council meetings, picture an emergency, a fire, a flood, an earthquake, with the several hundred residents of the 100 apartments proposed trying to leave while emergency vehicles are attempting to enter on the same dead-end driveway. Clearly a design for disaster. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a request from Jody Williams. Jody, is this for general, or was this about grant funding?
Grant funding, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Do we have anybody else that has a comment, general comment? It's not on an agenda item? Yes, Dan? Please step to the podium. Anna Marie?
My name's Stephen Martin. I live at 698 Hillside Drive here in Solvang, and a number of citizens are taking a look at the intersection of Old Mission Drive and Alamo Pintado to see what the traffic flow really looks like. I happen to be at the site for an hour and a half today from 11:30 to 1, and I was somewhat surprised to find that there were, during that period of time, 1,815 cars passed through the intersection. We had, that's 20 cars a minute, one every 3 seconds. We had 17 pedestrians crossing, which is one every 5 minutes, and 57 cars made a U-turn out of Alamo Pintado to get into the Mercantile Shopping Center. There were 3 to 4 backups where the traffic light down at Mission Drive and Alamo Pintado caused cars to back up into the intersection of Old Mission Drive and Alamo Pintado. So we already have a very congested intersection there, and I would urge the council to continue. I know you have discussions with the state about roundabouts for that intersection and the 246 and Mission Drive intersection. I would urge council to conclude those discussions, or at least solidify them by formally asking the state to put the 2 intersections on their calendar for roundabouts. Roundabouts would seriously reduce not just 10 or 15%, but 70 to 90% of the statistics, reducing accidents, comparing it with a traffic light or stop sign controlled intersection. And the same statistics for reducing injuries and death resulting from pedestrian accidents and automobile accidents. So we are in need, and will be in further need, of these types of roundabouts. So it's the time to put them on the calendars now, because it's going to take a long time for the state to come around prioritizing things. Secondly, the pedestrians that were crossing are in jeopardy. I mean, I think there is there are 2 crosswalks, and the pedestrians have the right of way, but with all of that traffic, it's really ripe for an accident. Some have said that the new development is not going to produce any further traffic because people are going to walk to Nielsen's and Mercantile. But I submit to you that one of 2 things is going to happen. Either the pedestrians who live in that new development are going to walk, in which case it takes 30 seconds or more to cross the 4-lane highway, in which time all traffic has to stop, or they're not going to go, and they're going to drive and add to the traffic. So we have to be realistic in assessing the traffic and the pedestrians. Finally, I'd like to just suggest that not only should you zone the 1 acre, half an acre parcel, but please consider a partial zoning of the 4.5 acre parcel of Site C to make it a 2.5 acre zone for high density.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks very much.
Anybody else that wants to make a comment on a non-agenda item? Yes, sir.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and Ponte, other council members. My name is Dan Martin. I'm a lifelong resident here of San Ynez Valley. And today was an eye-opener for me concerning the intersection of Alamo Pintado Road and Old Mission Drive. I've always felt there was a lot of traffic at that intersection, but today I saw why I felt that way. I volunteered to count some cars today, and I was blown away by the numbers. My first count was 1 hour, from 7:30 to 8:30 this morning. I concentrated on the vehicles using this intersection and cars making a left turn off of 246 towards this intersection, and they totaled 175. Vehicles turning left onto Highway 246 from Alamo Pintado Road equal to 153, and that's in 1 hour. So there's, 325 cars in just 1 hour that were using that intersection, those two intersections. Cars numbered anywhere from 7 to 13 at the signal and Highway 246, and that was backing up traffic up into Alamo Pintado on Old Mission Drive consistently. In the afternoon for 1 hour, numbers increased to 261 cars turning left onto 246, and 207 cars making a left turn from Alamo Pintado onto 246. Up to 13 cars were making these left-hand turns at the light signal, and they were backing up into the intersection of Alamo Pintado Road and Old Mission Drive. With the proposed Wildwood development at Site C, there could be another 154 to 222 vehicles from this development added to these intersections because there is only one entrance and exit planned for this development, and it empties onto Old Mission Drive, so it runs right into that intersection. This doesn't make any sense. The developer has stated in the past that he was raised in the San Ynez Valley, but he now lives in Northern California. He will not be affected by this situation, but you and I will. This development is not right and doesn't belong at Site C. It really doesn't belong in the valley. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Public comment on a non-agenda item? Okay, do we have anybody on Zoom? Randy? Doesn't look like it. Okay. Thank you. City Manager's report, please.
So I don't have much. I just wanted to point out a few things on the upcoming advanced calendar, we call it. Next meeting on June 10th, there will be a discussion about general municipal election resolutions, which will include a discussion of placing a TOT measure on the ballot in November. Going to approve the preliminary budget. And then in 2 more weeks, June 24th, the final budget adoption will be on the agenda. July 8th, 3CE will be making a presentation to council and the community about the programs they have and offer to the community. We'll also be at that meeting bringing a general plan forward for adoption at that time. In future meetings in August, there'll be a discussion of the Alamo Pintado Bridge project there at where the highway crosses the creek there when it flooded in January of last year. And Frontier Communications will be coming at a second meeting in August to discuss their efforts to bring 5G to the community. And that's all I have for now.
Thank you. Questions from the council? No? Okay, general comments, requests, anything from the council?
Yeah, sure I do. Well, first of all, I wanted to report out some of the meetings that I attended in the last couple of weeks. I attended the Groundwater Sustainability Committee meeting a week or so ago. We gave preliminary approval to a JPA, so we'll be bringing it back to this council for review and approval. I think Randy will guide us through that. This is the committee where we are looking at the health of our underground water, and we use well measurements to give us those indicators. So this past meeting, we looked at the reported results from March on the, great winter rain that we got, and it's pretty good results, even though it takes quite a while for the water to, trickle down to measurable depths. But the good news is we at least are even or on par from the last high water mark readings, and so the valley looks pretty healthy, at least from the Eastern Management Border perspective. More data to come, and when we read again in fall, which should give us a full 6-month or 8-month season of the water depth of the water table. So the second thing I want to report out is I attended the local Rotary meeting a week or so ago, where the Rotary recognized and gave out awards for the best highlighted performance and contributions from our first responders. It's one of my favorite meetings of the year, and while we're grateful for everything that these first responders deliver for our community every single day, it's just great to hear their stories about, personal sacrifice or overachievement, and the things that they do for the Sheriff's Department, the Fire Department, and Highway Patrol. So I just want to share that shout out, because these are phenomenal individuals that they and their families are making big sacrifices for us and doing amazing things every day. So on that point, the fire chief, I think he was fielding a question, was asked about this year's fire season. And he said that they were going to declare it, I think, in June, if I'm not mistaken. So the fire season is being declared later than other years, but some data that he shared made me, and recently when I was driving around town, all across the valley, I did notice quite a bit of overgrowth. So I want to ask staff if we could develop a fire abatement and brush removal program for the city. Not just the public spaces, but even encourage the community to clear out their private space and their fields or extra growth and open space, because it clearly is visually overgrown. It still feels like it's wet out there right now, like it's still even growing potentially. But when we get to fall or October, November, December, if we haven't done that work and we haven't encouraged the community to do it, you think we might be late at the game. And it would be great if we could have one of the local fire chiefs in to address the community in the city meeting forum, and see if we can't also be more educated about what we should be doing.
To add to that, the local news this evening before I came down here listed 5 fires up near San Luis Obispo. So the fire season has started, whether the fire chief wants to say so or not. So please be careful. Anybody else want to make comment?
I do have a comment. We had a very busy 3-day weekend. I want to thank everybody that participated into making the memorial at the Vets Hall possible. It's always a highlight of the year. I want to make a comment that a few local staffers have made about the parking, if it is parking, on Copenhagen Drive, right by the Wine Valley Inn. A lot of the city has been restriped, but there's a section, it isn't quite clear if it's green, if it's blue, if it's parking, if it's temporary. And one thing that has been brought up is that it's in a section of Copenhagen where it's not straight up. It's kind of at a curve. It's kind of hard to see ongoing traffic. And it's a particular area where there's a lot of unloading for trucks that are doing deliveries to local businesses and things. One thing to keep in mind when thinking of parking needs, most of us think about parking our cars, but we have tons of restaurants and hotels that need deliveries. There's big semis coming through town, and that affects traffic even more so during peak season. So just something to think in mind. I hate the thought of losing more parking, but on the other hand, it might be worth thinking about designated delivery areas or 15-minute parking spaces so that big delivery trucks are not cramming our already busy streets.
Mr. Mayor, if I may interject briefly, there was a request by Member Arona for staff to come back with a fire abatement and safety program, and I just wanted to, per the city council's guidelines, a majority of you need to agree to do that. You want staff to do that, so I just want to get clarification that the council as a whole is directing staff to do that.
Council, everybody, does anybody disagree with that idea?
It's just, if it's not too time-consuming for staff and they have the time for it, yeah, I'm okay with it.
Actually, yeah, I would work closely with the fire chief and get their recommendation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you.
I wanted to comment, I was at the Memorial Day services yesterday, and it was just a great community event. And it was organic in nature by virtue, even Colonel Titus from Vandenberg in his remarks mentioned that. But I also want to give a shout out to Al Salje. Al is leaving as the post commander after 12 years of the VFW post there. And I want to congratulate him and compliment him on his fine efforts in that behalf and in that capacity. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Both Robert and I were also at that memorial.
Yeah, my only comments, if I can go, in my almost 20-some-odd years here, it was one of the lighter turnouts that I've seen. I would have liked to see more people out, but it was a wonderful event. It wasn't too hot. In the first year I went, they go through the different branches of service, and the members stand up, and then they go through what era. And I think when I first moved here, there were probably 11 World War II vets that they recognized and stood up. And this year we're down to one. And he didn't stand up. He was in a wheelchair and he raised his cane. And I thought, God bless these people that did so much for this country. It's such a difficult, difficult time. And my heart goes out to those people, everybody from World War I, the Civil War, whatever, but World War I all the way through the War on Terror, just what these people do for all of us. And I wish there was some way to show more respect for them. It was really, really touching. The other thing is, thinking about, this is just a comment, just thinking about the TOT, there's about, 2 or 3 really, really, really nice hotels that are in the works. I'd like to see that speed up a little bit if we can, because you're talking about a lot of keys that generate a lot of money. And then Saturday, June 1st, is Adopt a Pet Day in Santa Barbara County. So if you get a chance, go on their website and take care of a petty animal. That's all I got.
Thank you. I also was at the award ceremony, or the ceremony for the first responders, as was our city manager and the 2 council women. We were all there to show our respect for what was going on. I had a chance at the memorial ceremony yesterday to make a presentation on behalf of the city to the veterans and present that proclamation to Alvin Salji. As Mr. Brown had said, he is going to be stepping aside from his role, and it was nice to be able to give him that document right at the end of his time. And I think that's everything from me. So we're done. Let's go to, please, item 6 is the consent items. Madam Clerk, if you would take that. Oh, well, we're going to do this as part of you want to do this as part of the consent items, don't you? You want to take this out of consent? Yeah. Please introduce the consent items, if you would, please, Ms. Clerk.
Consent is for routine administrative city matters and is approved with one motion. These items are discussed only on request of council members. Members of the public were afforded an opportunity to speak during the public communications portion of this agenda.
At this time, what we're going to do is ask the council if there's anything they want to pull, but what I have been asked to do is pull item 4D on the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's April statistics, and let Lieutenant Valencia come up and present that information to us.
Sure.
Mark, you're up.
Wait, we need to vote.
Yeah. If you don't
Oh, no,
mind,
okay. Come on.
Mayor, so I think we could do it this way, is we can vote to approve consent items A through C and E through F, and then that would in effect pull out item D, and then we can proceed with the presentation for item D.
You are so by the book.
I'm making a
It's my
motion.
job.
I'll make a motion, we approve consent items A through C and E through F.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes?
Councilmember Claudia Rona?
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Infante?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you very much, Madam Attorney.
Just forget to do a motion at the end of the sheriff's report.
Okay. Now, Lieutenant, it's all yours, sir. Apologize for bringing you up prematurely.
No problem. Good evening, Mayor and Council. How are you this evening? I too would like to thank the Rotarians. That was a stellar event this year, supporting the first responders, and we appreciate that wholeheartedly. It was quite the event for those of you who were there, and we look forward to continue serving the city and the community of the Salinas Valley. In going over the statistics as of April, I won't bore you with the minutia of each individual crime, but I can say that we are statistically consistent with the stats from last year. We've had some significant crimes in certain areas that were different than last year, but the big ones, the murders, the rapes, are down. So that is obviously a very good thing. Our traffic citations are a little bit higher, and the traffic issues that we're having we are compiling the stats so we can have a better understanding, because we're trying to separate the individual stats by city so we can comply with our contracts, so it's a little more accurate, to be fair all around, because for the rest of the constituents that may not see that, like Alamo Pintado and the line and the bridge, we have to get the statistics from the CHP for the city lines, and all of those factor into the overall stats and the stat pictures. I did want to cover our burglary totals are down this year than they were last year. However, we had a substantial commercial burglary last week that we just are working on right now. Once we get the information, we'll get that out as soon as we can, but our forensic unit is working that, so that's just what we're stuck with at this time, and it's time-consuming, and property crimes, as you know, with staffing, kind of get bumped down a little bit. I can address any questions. I know we have quite a few. I would rather go that route for time purposes. I think the number one question I will just jump into is the homeless issue in Solvang. So with our city attorney and county council, we came up with the ordinance that our county council is not allowing us to enforce. That's based on the Martin versus Boise. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Ninth Circuit Court, the Ninth Circuit Supreme Court is responsible for our area, including Idaho, Arizona, I believe it's Alaska, Guam, the 4 districts in California. And so what they're saying is that we can't criminalize homelessness. They're citizens, and they have the same rights as any other citizen in the United States. What they established was that the city itself would have to provide services in order for us to criminalize it, in the sense that we have a place to put them, and we don't in Solvang. So that being said, when they're camping on the sidewalks or camping in the Vets Hall area, we have moved them along. Our numbers are higher this year. I believe I got the statistics this year because I wanted to be specific, but based on the Southern California count, there's 653,000 homeless people, with almost 50% living in Southern California. That's in the United States. So we're now seeing in our field contacts, I think we had one yesterday from Minnesota. We've had them from all over the Colorado. We get them from all over as they're passing through our area. That is a problem, but it's a societal problem more than a law enforcement problem, because our hands are tied in how we deal with it. So I'd like to address that. What are the questions that the city or city council has, or even the public may have, on what we can and can't do about it? Because collectively, being homeless is not a crime.
And I would just like to put some guardrails on the discussion. I mean, this was agendized as a presentation from the sheriff's office. So if there are, further questions, we can certainly bring something back to it for a future council meeting. But I want to caution on an in-depth discussion about the enforceability of our homeless ordinance at this time.
Thank you.
And that might be my fault. It was brought up posed as a question to me to address this evening as a priority.
Council?
Thank you, Chief. I see that the numbers on the thefts are down, and I know that a lot of people don't report thefts. Do you know of the thefts, what we're dealing with as far as tourists versus residents? Do we have any problem with the like in San Francisco with the smash the windows of the rent-a-car and steal everything? Do we have any problems with the tourists being accosted or anything stolen from the tourists when they're here?
Yes.
That you know of, we do?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of them don't report it, or they'll report it after they left the town. We get that a lot. We'll get a phone call, and it's their insurance that'll want, or their cell phone has been stolen. That is commonplace weekly, where they don't actually want to report, but they need to make an incident or create an incident. We have what's called an incident catalog, so they make a call to dispatch. That's a separate call than an actual report or a case number. But we had one this week where their cell phone was stolen on a window smash, and they never reported it. So we get that a lot, and we ask them to report it. We try to get that out. Maybe it's something I can work with the Chamber of Commerce on in order to get some of that information out, to report the crime as it happens instead of 3 days later, 4 days later when something has happened, and there's really nothing I can do at that time to even follow up on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Question, Lieutenant. First of all, thanks for everything you do
Thank you.
and for being here tonight. And for helping ensure our statistics are constant and low. It's a pretty safe city. The one area that I think is trending unsafe for people who use a lot is that riverbed. And I don't think that our ordinance that we put in place earlier this year is a homeless ordinance. It's an anti-camping ordinance. And my simple question is there anything in that ordinance that is not legal?
So the issue we have is, per our county council, the ordinance, it doesn't target homelessness by title, but it targets homelessness. We don't have regular campers that camp in the river as a recreational. Because and understand, being the station lieutenant, I'm the station lieutenant of San Ynez. So I have the Refugio crossing, I have Solvang, our river here, I have Buellton as their chief of police, and I also have Lompoc. So in dealing with the 4 to 5 transients that camp in our river compared to the 100 and so that I deal with in Lompoc, the numbers are a little disparaging. So yes, it is an anti-camping ordinance. One of the complaints I received this week actually came with photos that if you look at the green belt on Fjord, and that, if I'm understanding correctly, is not city property, that is owned by San Ynez,
Yes,
the
it
states. There's a clear and obvious marked no trespassing sign. It is as bright as day, and I've seen it. The issue is, if I have to enforce the no trespassing and no camping and no overnight, I have to include everyone. And when I see kids playing in the river and I see people having fun in the river, I would have to also advise them that this is a no trespassing area. I'm willing to do that. Is the city willing to support the sheriff's office if I do so? Because I can't be selective in the laws I enforce and the people I enforce them on.
We get it.
That's terrible. Never thought about it.
So the gate is open, and then it says you can walk through with your dog, and it says no trespassing. It's bright as day. But I can't be selective in who I tell not to trespass. I can't be selective I've seen kids pop tents during the day, and they have a great time in the river, and they're inner tubing, and they're enjoying themselves. How do I differentiate of who can be there and who cannot?
Yeah, I think we have to cooperate on that with you because the ordinance is really time defined.
Right.
Right? When we have, if they're day visits, that's not an issue. If they're staying for days, multiple days, and leaving personal items, that's where we have the challenge.
Right, and we've gone out there, I say we would spend a lot of time out there. And I can say 2 of them are from the San Ynez Valley, and they're not going anywhere. This is their home. And we moved them by the ordinance, and they just relocate to a new area. It's like in the parking days where you would chalk a car tire, the car moves, I have to re-chalk the tire.
Okay, we were told not to spend too much time on this particular subject, so we're going to have to back off a little bit. Mr. Clark, you look like you were going to say
No,
something.
I'm sure you've seen in the news the last 2 weeks that the state has spent $20 billion in the last 5 years to eradicate homelessness, and they just discovered they have absolutely no metric or no way to figure out if it helped anybody. They have no way to know how many people they've housed.
Yeah.
Nothing at all for $20 billion, and there's no data behind it. And everybody's pointing fingers at everybody else. The state's pointing fingers at the cities, and the cities are pointing fingers at the states. It's just a problem the state, it's a very welcoming state, and very lenient and very funny.
Well, the fact that it's sunny most of the time and it's a lot nicer to spend time outdoors in the middle of the night here than, say, Montana
Minnesota.
probably has something to do
I
with
spent 3 years in
it.
New York City, and I was like, if you're homeless, why are you here? Why are you not in Palm Springs?
Okay.
Okay.
Any last?
And any other questions on any other crime issues, we can address all of them.
The only question I had was the totals I see with regards to property theft. Even one year, it looks like 200,000, another 200,000 for the year. But your recoveries were minuscule at best, maybe $400 back. What are you doing to get, how do you catalog that, or how do you help people with any kind of restitution when they're a victim of a crime, particularly property?
Usually at that point, we work with the DA's office, but the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department no longer has a property detective division. Due to staffing and budgeting, we've had to move our detectives over to crimes against persons as a priority. So our detective division is divided on major crimes, such as the homicides, the rapes, and then we have the child crimes. We have crimes against children and the sex crimes unit. So they're 2 separate units. Property crimes are a priority, but they're a property priority, not a person priority. So some of our detectives, our young deputies, I should say, who wish to be detectives, I give them those cases to work, and they do a great job on it. But they can only take it so far as a patrol deputy because they don't have the authority as a detective, and plus they have a primary responsibility of patrol. So we do try to assist as best we can, but we will file the case. But if it comes down to property, it's just not, reluctantly, I have to say that it's not prioritized in a place where it should be. And I agree that it should be. People should be able to have their stuff not stolen while they're in anywhere, much less the city of Solvang. I mean, that's just their right to. I have issues with thieves because that's where it starts, but we just don't have the resources right now that are going to focus on the property crimes as much as we would like to. And we do address it as best we can, but it's kind of based on the level of, if a cell phone is stolen, we're going to apologize and go to the car crash or the overdose or the other cases that we have in place, and before we prioritize that.
Thank you. Not what I wanted to hear, but.
Right, it's not good, it's not good news, but it's where we are in law enforcement right now with, remember, we've lost a lot of money also, so we have to cut back certain things, and that affects overall the communities and then the people in them, because we're not able to address all the crimes the way we want to. I mean, actually, there was a time, 20 years ago, this station had 3 lieutenants and a commander. Now there's just me and 1 commander for the entire North County Division, yet our population has gone up, our tourism has gone up. If you look at all the things we deal with, those issues have risen, but services have dropped.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant. Appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point in time, I think we need to have a motion that says we accept this presentation.
Yes, it would be a motion to receive and file the SBC Sheriff's April Statistics Report. Thank you.
I'll make a motion, so said.
Receive and file.
Receive and file.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Rona.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Infante.
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0.
thank you very much. All right, now, let's get on to something that's not very controversial. Item 6A, if you would introduce that, please.
6A.
7A.
I'm sorry, 7A, my apologies.
No worries.
Public hearing to consider introduction and first reading of ordinance number 24-0375, amending Chapter 2 Sewer Code and Chapter 3 Water Code of Title 9 Water and Sewer of the Solvang Municipal Code to require utility accounts to be in the property owner's name, incorporate state requirements for disconnection of delinquent residential accounts, provide additional enforcement options, and make other conforming edits, and making a determination of exemption under the California Environmental Quality Act.
Thank you. I have one comment for 7A.
Staff report first.
Staff report? Nah. My apologies, please. Staff report.
So thank you, Mayor and City Council. I'll make my comments brief. This ordinance is before you as a way to implement direction that staff received from council earlier this year to address the city's difficulty in recovering delinquent utility bills. And one piece of that direction was to require that all accounts going forward be in the property owner's name rather than allowing tenants to have the utility bill in their name. And so this ordinance, should you decide to introduce it, would make that change. The idea is that the city is better able to keep track of and enforce against property owners and make sure that they're paying the bills and find them if they don't, rather than tenants who we've noticed when they don't pay the bill, they often leave town and then the city's stuck. In addition, consistent with the council's prior direction, the ordinance makes certain changes to clarify the procedures for disconnection for residential customers and make that consistent with state law. The ordinance basically just says that the city will develop a policy that's consistent with state law. So we would be bringing that policy back to you at a later date should we pass this ordinance, and that would be adopted by resolution later. And then there's other conforming edits. While we were in there, we decided to reorganize some things to make the code read a little more smoothly. But I'm happy to answer any questions about the edits. There is the formal ordinance in your packet, and then also a legislative track changes version to show you how the current code is changing.
Questions?
Yeah, walk me through the process, if you would, for a non-paying utility by a tenant, and then the same procedure if it's the owner.
I mean, how we collect on it?
Yeah, that's what this whole thing's about, is collection, right?
I mean, Wendy might be able to step in, but the process is similar. It's just that once the tenant, stops being a tenant at that property, we often don't have the ability to locate them and continue to go after them or pursue them in small claims court, send them administrative citations, whereas the owner is they're still in town, essentially.
Yes, but would you put a lien against the property? Is that the reason to have the owner and the tenant responsible for the water bill, or who has that account number, I guess? Or
The
that
owner would
service?
have the account number. And let me clarify, this is prospective. This would be prospective only. So current accounts that are in the tenant's name would not automatically go away. It's just when that tenant left that facility, that building, the tenancy ends, the next account would be in the owner's name, not the future tenant's name.
And that would be true of multifamily buildings as well?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, they can deal with, it's not, ultimately, I think the tenant's still going to pay the utility, but it will just be a matter of that will be decided through their lease terms rather than the tenant having the utility account with the city in their name. For our purposes, it will be through the owner. We did add a little flexibility in the ordinance for your consideration that allows the owner to designate someone, such as a tenant or whoever they want to get the bill in the mail. So it could still be sent to the tenant, but ultimately legally the account is in the owner's name, and so they're responsible.
And what if there's a service interruption for lack of payment? How's that work? Or is it shut down? I don't know the answer to that.
There's a lot of procedures under state law you have to follow if it's residential. If it's commercial, the procedures for shutting off water would stay the same as they currently are, which we give them. They have to be delinquent for a certain amount of time. We give them ample notice to try to get back on track, opportunities to, come into compliance, payment plans, that kind of thing. And similar there's a similar process under state law for residential, but the timelines are a little more strict. And so we made that clear that that's consistent with state law. But yes, you could still get the water shut off if the owner's not paying. Because again, even though it's on our end, it would be on the owner would be the account holder, but the owner's going to pass that on to the tenant who's actually using the water. Yeah.
Any other questions? In that case, we'll go to public comment. Frank, Mr. Smithson.
Thank you. Frank Smithson. I live in the Village Collection, and I am a property owner. I have some rental properties. Thank you very much for your questions, Councilmember Brown. You answered some for me. The problem I was having was whether I was going to have to rewrite lease agreements, figuring out how this is going to be concerned. You got to figure out on which way to go with the tenant, whether it's in their loan. And if a deadbeat landlord doesn't pay their water, what are y'all going to do when they come to you saying that their water's been turned off as the tenant, for one? Another thing, I was kind of on mine, if we have any type of low-income subsidies, now we're raising their rent. Is that going to mess with the renters that have any type of subsidies, whether it be for their rent or even for their, so there was some water subsidies available. I think it just expired. But then you've got these that they won't qualify for any type of water subsidies because they won't have a water bill. It's not in their name. I think to me, it sounds like we're just passing this on from the city attorney. We're just passing this on to the property owner because it's someone you'll have here to go after. I think it should still be handled by the tenant. I do have properties that we do include the water because the city only has 1 meter on a duplex. So I do have to include the water in that one. So that's kind of because of the situation. Another one we have is was looking when I was trying to figure this out earlier, if I can only raise my rates every year by 10% or 5% plus cost of living, okay? On one of my units, it's $1,300 a month. I can only raise it $130 roughly. That's not going to cover the water rates here. I haven't even been able to figure out if that's something I have to take into concerns of being able to raise my rates yearly by the law of 10% or 5% plus cost of living. Okay, if the amount that I can go up doesn't even cover the water when I do have to put someone in there, then it's something that we do could be opening a can of worms for a lot of other things, whether it be someone who's not going to be a low income and qualify for any type of low income subsidies because we're raising their rent that may throw them out of that or throw that out of whack, and it's because there's water rates in there. Then the other thing I was thinking, there's been a lot said about the high density housing. This could possibly be a good thing. You put it in there, and when Site C finds out he's going to be paying $31,000 more a month for water because he's going to have to cover the water for all those units, because that's what you're all proposing right now. So he may think about having to go away. Thank you very much, and that's just my concerns there. But it does sound like the renters I do have in now, it is more or less grandfather, wouldn't be something we have to worry about till they do. And I have long-term renters anyway. They don't tend to stay, so it may not affect me that much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Frank.
I have a question. Do Section 8s generally pay utilities?
I couldn't answer that off the top of my head, but
They do, but they might get a subsidy. Yeah, they pay, but it might be reduced.
And just to be clear, this doesn't affect current.
Correct.
Yeah, current accounts in the name of the tenant, and it would be up to the property owners to figure out how they wanted to deal with it with the tenants once it does the next time they're, opening a new account and how they want to handle it with food.
Yeah, and I have no problem with the tenant in a home and a landlord making whatever arrangements they want to make.
And it doesn't have to be a raise in the rent. It can just be you pay the water bill, here's
Yeah.
the bill. But if they go blank, we have somebody to go back to.
I have no problem with it.
Well, hopefully landlords aren't making profit on the transfer of the water cost. It should be net zero, the same rent or the same outflow for a combined rent and water cost.
In essence, the way I view this is the landlord or the owner is the last person that is holding the bag for payment. They can do that by virtue of a deposit or whatever they wish to do, whatever agreements they have with their own tenant. This is only so we can collect and not have these issues in the future as it relates to our customers for the utility.
Mr. Murphy?
I was just going to point out, I rent a home here in Solvang, and my landlord pays the water bill. They calculated what my rent would be. I guess they took an average. They wanted to keep the yard green, obviously, so they're willing to pay the water bill. 1 month my water bill was unusually high, and they told me to turn my water off, but it was a leak or some kind of an error. But the point is that, it's not an uncommon thing, and they factored it into the cost of my rent, and I gladly pay it.
Thank you very much.
I just want to be clear that, did we close the public hearing? There's no further public comment.
All right, is there anybody else in the audience that would like to make a comment on this subject? And it doesn't appear we have anybody on Zoom either. So this is the first reading, so this is not an approval, it's just an acceptance.
You do need to make a motion to introduce the ordinance, but yes, it will come back. Should you do that, it will come back at the next council meeting for a second reading.
Right.
And after that, it would be effective 30, if you adopted the second reading, it would be effective 30 days later.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the ordinance number 240375 for future,
First reading, yes.
for your first reading. There you go.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Arona?
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Infante?
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0.
thank you very much. Okay, so that was 7A. Now let's go to 8A, please. And if you would introduce that, Madam Clerk?
Discussion and possible action to advance grant funding requests for the addition into the proposed budget.
Staff report.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council members, and members of the public.
Mike?
You got to get it closer to you is all. It was on. You can see the light.
Is that better? Is that better?
Speak up. There you go.
Speak up. All right. Tonight, before you, we have the grant funding requests. And the city recognizes the value of the nonprofit organizations and contributions to the community, which is why we have maintained the grant funding policy. City Council reviews the grant funding requests on an annual basis, and along with the ad hoc budget committee. The grant funding policy prioritizes senior services, solving citizen services, veteran services, and minors with disabilities. The policy does state that grant funding is based on the availability of funds. If council approves the following requests in the table below, these amounts will be included in the proposed 24-25 and 25-26 budget. We do a biennial budget every year, which is a 2-year cycle. The ad hoc budget committee met on May 8th and May 18th to determine the grant funding amounts. The general fund budget is in a deficit. At the time I did the report, it was in a deficit of $873,000. And as of Friday, the general fund is in the red and a deficit of $1,017,000.
The general fund balance has declined over the last several years, and currently with that deficit of $1 million, capital improvements are not included, along with the grant funding applicants that have been proposed of the 69,000. So any decision you guys make tonight, if you change that 69,000, then that money, the deficit will continue to increase if you decide to fund other applicants. And council can discuss and motion to determine a cap on the grant funding. That's a possibility. We are looking at bringing the policy back to council to possibly include a mandatory grant funding meeting so we can go over the terms of all future grant applicants. That could be a mandatory meeting to make sure that everybody understands the qualifications and the processes, and also to make sure that they supply all the required documents, including the 990s and the financials. That has been a problem this year. And we won't accept those. We won't accept any incomplete grant application, but that will come at a future meeting. And staff understands that there is a conflict of interest in a decision involving the Atterdaggett home. So we will have to follow the process of that council member reclusing himself once the decisions are going to be made. We're looking for further direction to staff, and if council approves the funding, then we'll include that $69,000 in the general fund expenses, and the deficit will increase. And that concludes my staff report.
Question, go ahead.
Wendy, on the budget that you shared, the 69,000, are you approving that for the 2-year, each year?
Each year,
69,000?
we will open it up to new grant funding applications, but it is a 2-year budget cycle.
Okay,
So
for humanitarian grants, or
Will
for the
be-
same folks that we approved today?
it will be annual, so they'll have to reapply next
Thank you.
in
Wanna-
25,
Want to
26.
clarify that, thank you.
Any other questions?
No.
Can you just clarify, Wendy, the deficit is a projection, correct, for next year's budget? It
The
is
deficit is a projection,
Projection.
yes, based on the average of expenses in the last couple of years.
And we still have the work to do in the upcoming weeks and upcoming meetings to actually approve that budget before all is said and done, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And that budget also does not include capital projects, and when we don't include capital projects, we're deferring costs that will eventually be more expensive for repairs and maintenance.
Yeah. Okay, there was a couple things in that staff report. Let's see if I understand it all correctly. First off, we have some issues for this year where the grant funding was authorized if they followed the rules. Have we provided all of that money out for this year?
We have not. We are still waiting on one applicant's submittal of receipts
Okay.
and proof of payments. We did receive one other applicant's invoices and proof of payment, but it wasn't for the full amount.
Okay, so what we're dealing with right now is next year's budget. So all of the funding we're talking about comes out of next year's budget, not this year's. And right
Correct.
now, you're telling us we have a forecasted next year of over $1 million deficit.
Correct.
And the balance of the general fund has gone down over $500,000 every year for the last 3 years.
Yeah. So it's not just 1 year that we're dealing with.
Well, and one of my concerns, if I could add, is that with the state, with a $42 billion deficit, as far as relief from the state for locals, municipalities, is not as
It's not like.
rosy as it might have been a few years ago when we had a $100 billion surplus.
Yeah.
We now have a $42 billion deficit, and so I don't think relief's going to be coming from the state anytime soon.
And I'd like to state that with the ad hoc budget committee, it's a difficult decision because the city's here to help the nonprofits, but when money isn't available, then we have to make a determination on what we're going to do, and it has nothing to do with personalities of people wanting to fund one agency again, other than another agency. So it has everything to do with the dollars and cents, not, personalities or,
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, if I don't like them, I don't have any
Yeah.
choice? Murphy, please.
I was going to point out that, when we did the initial compilation of the budget, the number was closer to 2 million. Staff went through. We realized there was a revenue that we didn't count fully. We realized that there were some things that we could do without. One of the things we did was, we intend to do is reduce the janitorial contract that was recently approved and put that burden back on staff. There were positions that were planned to be filled for the full year that we're recommending when the budget comes forward at the next meeting to only fund for half a year. So they would not start until January. So, we've done a lot of things to reduce the deficit, and we're still at $1 million deficit. The grant total ask was, round figures, 375,000. So we reduced that by 300,000, and we're still, so if everybody got what they asked for, we'd be talking about, $1.3 million deficit, not just over $1 million. So, these are tough choices. As Wendy said, it was not any one individual holding court making decisions. It was done with the ad hoc committee, being full disclosure. And, there's a possibility to fill the deficit. We're going to the Measure U committee tomorrow to ask them to consider providing some of the Measure U revenues to fill that hole. But that, again, does not include any of these grant funds. So it's tough choices, but that's kind of where we are right now.
Can you help us understand a budget question on that? On Measure U, because you just brought it up and mentioned it, it is its own budget. It's its own department code. It is not meant to be commingled. Is that correct? With the general fund?
It's actually general fund money, but because there's an oversight committee, staff and the auditors agreed to put it in its own separate fund, but it is for general services. And we can opt to pay the law enforcement contract increase. We could pay that out of the Measure U money because that's one of the, when it went to the vote of the people, that was one of the things was 911 services. So it is general fund money, but to keep it open and transparent, we put it in its own separate fund.
I think to keep it separate was also my interpretation, so I'll say it. It was put on the ballot for new services.
No, I don't think so.
Not new services. It was.
Incremental services, additional services.
The language did not specify new. It just said potholes and law enforcement and those kinds of things. It did not specifically state new or currently not being spent. But we could also, when that, to the extent people might have understood that, that was prior to the sheriff's contract going up 30%. That was prior to double-digit inflationary impacts of COVID, and just having, no control over the escalation of the things that we have to pay.
Pointing that out, I think it does say new services or additional services, because that was in the meeting minutes from the Measure U committee meeting, this last meeting.
That
The
was
reason
the
I'm bringing it
discussion
up,
that they
Randy,
understood that, yeah.
The reason I'm bringing it up is because the sheriff did point out, we're getting the same services for more cost, right? Just a few minutes ago. So we aren't getting anything incremental unless we were to spend it on something like the 911 service, which was language in the ballot measure. So here's another question on that point. Did the FEMA dollars that were owed for the LaSalle Road repair, is that considered in the budget? Does it factor into the deficit, or is it a separate budget fund?
It's not in the budget, and we can't realize that money until we get farther in the process to get that money reimbursed.
Okay, that's almost 900,000. I know we won't get all of it, but can we take accelerated action to make sure we get in position to realize that reimbursement next year?
Staff has been submitting all the required paperwork to FEMA, and it's up to FEMA to do, to go through their process.
Okay,
And
but we
once-
haven't triggered that process because we haven't submitted the request, correct?
No, it's submitted on an ongoing basis.
Okay.
You want to make another? Okay, let's go to public comment then. If we,
Before we go on public comments, I just one question regarding the sheet that we got on the blue folder, because the
So the sheet you have in the new folder, it is the fund balances. Are you looking at this one?
yes,
It's updated as of Friday.
okay.
Where
And
the staff report, it was updated at the time that I did, submitted the staff report for the packet.
okay, is it on page 85, attachment B?
Hang on. Okay, are you talking about this one?
Yes, so I'm just wondering, the codes there that say what fund each row is for, are those the same as the ones here?
Yes, they're just in a different order. But you have to look at, the top line, on, 85B is, the unrestricted balance as of, 6/30/22, 6/30/23, and then projected fund balance as of 6/30/24, which we won't have until the end of this fiscal year. And we receive all our revenue.
Yes, that's,
And then
Okay.
this one here, this is just for 24/25 and 25/26.
okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that, based on the code over here, to understand what each fund is, we look back to
Yes, they're
attachment B.
they're the
and
same
it's-
fund, yeah.
Okay, this is just an updated, like a current,
Yes, yeah.
okay, current,
Current for the next 2 fiscal years.
Okay.
Based on our best projections.
okay, thank you.
okay, at this point, let's go to public comment. My first speaker slip is for Mr. Thomas Burkholm.
Hi, good evening. My name is Thomas Burkholm. Oh. My name is Thomas Burkholm. I do own a business here in Solvang, and I am the president of our Danish Days Foundation. Along with me is Eric Clayhaw. He's on board, and Ashley Madrid, which is my vice president. So we come to you tonight regarding the decision to defund Danish Days Foundation by $20,000 for this year's festival. As you're aware, Danish Days is the only Danish event in our town annually. Danish Days is also set up all volunteers. It's set up, tear down the day of the event, and the festival brings a lot of people from LA, San Francisco to our community. By defunding, the Danish Days Foundation could threaten us having it Friday night and Sunday afternoon, which will cancel the Friday night is the Candlelight Parade, then Saturday is our main festival day, and then Sunday is our children's parade. So by defunding us could possibly just be a one-day event, which is going to take away from hotels, restaurants, so people more likely will just come up and have a day trip from LA or the nearby larger cities.
Yeah, this is our first year, so we would love support from everybody and from the community too, just to help us out and show us the right way of doing it.
And with our Danish Days Festival, the local markets, Nielsen or Valley Fresh Market, El Rancho, we buy all of our produce and sausage and that from our local markets, our eggs and all that, which helps with the Danish Days breakfast.
Rentals and T-shirts and everything's local. Everything's going back into our community.
So we stay within the valley of hosting this festival, which is going to be our 87th year doing this. So this is a new board now. We're trying to make the best of it. We're just kind of trying to figure it out as we go. And last year's, I'm pretty sure all you guys were present there during our Danish Days Festival, and it was probably one of the largest ones I've ever seen since I was a child till now.
It's only going to get bigger.
Yes, and then the price, our whole price of, because we got to get all the paper plates and all the other ingredients in that, it was a 20% increase from last year, and it seems like everything else, like price of, milk, eggs, that's what makes all the able skeevers, and just all those raw products are going up even more and more. So I've seen 20% increase throughout the market, same with you guys from day-to-day grocery runs, right?
Yep.
That 3 minutes?
That's your time. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Olmsted?
Good evening, Mayor Infante, City Council members. I'm Tom Olmsted. I'm the co-chair of the Capital Campaign Committee for the Senior Center. I'm here to acknowledge we're moving forward with the new state-of-the-art center. The center activities are actually moving to the American Legion Wing next week. Construction, therefore, should begin with demolition of the current building in July. We're days away from getting our building permit. In addition, we've applied for a demolition permit that should be issued next week. The work on the amended lease with the county is completed and should be approved by the Board of Supervisors at their June meeting. The amendments will give the Senior Center a long-term lease with renewals through 2113. I can't even imagine that. The Capital Campaign Committee has raised over $5 million from the very generous individuals, foundations, grants, and of course, support from the city. Thank you. We believe we now have the money to build the building. When we discovered the project was subjected to prevailing wages, which added $1 million to the cost of the new building, the city generously contributed $450,000 to keep the project alive. We're grateful. However, we emphasize the separation of capital campaign support from ongoing operational funding. Capital campaign funds need to be kept separate from general operations per donor requirements to keep the focus on the building cost. The $450,000 from the city is dedicated to constructing the new building. But we also need ongoing program support to run the day-to-day operations consisting of programs and activities. It was suggested by the ad hoc committee the center would be forgiven $50,000 in added utility costs, in part to replace the loss of operating money. But our utility costs are much lower. 100% of our annual utility cost is around $8,000. Therefore, the $50,000 credit would be a little benefit to the Solvang, to the operations of the center. As we move to our new home for Solvang seniors, we need to focus on how we keep operating services and funding in place going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Janet Oliveira?
Members of the City Council, I'm Janet Oliveira, and I'm co-treasurer of the Solvang Senior Center. And I'm here to urge you to restore our $70,000 grant, which is essential for maintaining our services to seniors. For over 20 years, the city has funded our center, with those grants averaging 20 to 25% of our revenue in the past decade. Other local senior centers like Lompoc and Goleta are fully integrated into city operations with higher funding than our request. Buellton has increased its line item funding from a multi-year commitment of $140,000 per year to a one-year commitment of $250,000 next fiscal year. We seek a commitment from you reflecting our community value. Our relationship with the city is mutually beneficial. We provide our citizens with cost-effective essential services. Our $70,000 request is less than the salary of one Parks and Rec employee, demonstrating our efficiency and value. We rely on this funding for vital services. Dues and individual donations cover only 10% of our revenue, with 90% from foundations, and city funding. Losing 25% of our budget would be catastrophic. Increasing dues slightly won't cover a $70,000 shortfall. Our costs are rising, and our modest reserves are maintained for long-term stability. We minimize costs with volunteer labor, resulting in a savings of about $48,000 annually. Our meal program charges seniors exactly the same rate that we pay for that meal. The board believes this program shouldn't generate profit. Our transition costs during the construction exceed your special grant, so we will need to use some of our reserves to cover that excess. We operate on a lean budget without an endowment or large reserves. Foundation funding is inconsistent, and losing any funding jeopardizes our services. Foundations provide both one-time and continuing support, recognizing our essential services, and we hope the city will do the same. We ask the council to restore our $70,000 grant. Your capital campaign grant showed your commitment to our seniors. Operational funding is equally critical. Currently, nearly 30% of Solvang's population is 65 and older and a growing demographic. It's our responsibility to invest in their well-being and independence. Thank you for your prior support and for your time and consideration with this request.
Thank you very much. Ellen Albertoni?
Good evening, Mayor Infante and City Council members. I'm Ellen Albertoni, the Executive Director of the Solvang Senior Center. Approximately 60% of center members are Solvang residents. We have seen a significant increase in that number alone over the past year. We provide members with over 20 activities a week at no cost to them. The opportunities to socialize and take care of their physical health is outweighed by the mental health benefits of being together as a community. Loss of funding will impact our ability to serve well-balanced meals to our seniors, which now we serve approximately 50 per day. We have seen a trend in caregivers picking up meals for members who are homebound. For seniors who are still independent but live alone, the incentive to cook a nutritious meal often wanes. The center provides them with the opportunity to both pick up a well-balanced meal and an opportunity to socialize. The number of staff members and our number of volunteers is very lean. We cannot afford to cut back on either. It is difficult for us to recruit both. And transitioning from the center to the Legion Wing will already impact our need to add volunteers. As we are an important component of assisting seniors to age in place safely, we absorb the impact of an additional service that the city would otherwise be responsible for. Per Ms. Wise's presentation, the 60-year-plus population in our state is projected to grow and diversify faster than any other age group, up to a quarter of the state's population by 2030. The center is already feeling the effects of this growth as the number of younger seniors returning to the community to care for aging parents has grown. We are one of the first places they reach out to looking for needed services for both their parents and themselves. And this is something Ms. Wise brought up, as we are a call center. If we lose funding, we will be forced to pass costs of vital life-enriching activities on to members and reduce the number of individuals that we can realistically serve. We have an obligation to support our active aging adult population, many who have dug down deep in their pockets to support both the center and the new center. We have always thought of the city as a reliable partner who fully supports us so that we can support others. If the council chooses not to fund operations, it will be the first time in over 40 years of funding social service programs that this has happened. And I feel like this provides a negative message to our community. We ask that the city explore every avenue available to find a way to fund city operations and to earnestly explore a way to include us as a line item in the budget in future years. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jody Williams?
Good evening, Mayor Infante and council members.
All right, you're done.
My name is Jody Williams. I'm the president of the Solvang School Education Foundation. I am here today to offer more detailed information about the grant presentation that I previously made at the prior meeting. We are requesting $10,000 to help support the 5th and 8th grade science camp trips. The Solvang School Education Foundation is committed to paying 100% of these costs for all students at the school. We believe this is a very important rite of passage experience for these children. They get hands-on learning in an outdoor environment. It's crucial for critical thinking, development, cognitive development, learning how to work together with your peers, having that experience away from your parents, having to critically think on your own, take care of yourself. These are really, really amazing experiences that the kids get, along with hiking, scuba diving, snorkeling, kayaking, a lot of things that a lot of these children might not have the ability to do or opportunities to do without this. We are anticipating our program costs going up because of student population in the 2024-25 school year to $60,288. The 72% of these anticipated children are Solvang residents, bringing that total to 92 students. We are the requested grant amount of $10,000 would cover 21 of these student costs. The city's proposed grant amount of $3,000 brings us down to covering 6.4 students, so 7% of the costs. We would appreciate the council to consider granting a revised amount of $5,000. We understand that the budget is in a deficit and there are shortfalls. The $5,000 would cover 10.6 students, which brings us to 12%. It's very common for cities to support nonprofits, and we really appreciate your nonprofit support and Wendy's very nice words about the community and how important it is for this council to support all of these organizations that are offering services and programs. So we thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody else in the audience that would like to speak on this subject? It doesn't appear we have anybody on Zoom, so we'll bring it back to the council. At this point in time,
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and council, I have a known conflict of interest on this matter, so I will excuse myself while you deliberate. And
Member Brown, if you could just state the nature of the conflict and with which organization.
I'm married, that's the conflict. And the conflict is with Atterdag at Home. My wife is the director of that. So I will excuse myself.
You're excused.
And we'll call you back in for the rest of the item.
Can I ask a question on that procedurally, Chelsea, before Mr. Brown excuses himself? Because there are other members of applicants on the council. So is there more clarity on the recusal requirement?
So in this case, Mrs. Brown there's a financial income to the family. It's not just a membership in the organization. So there's a financial interest.
But we don't grant for administrative or overhead. We grant for services.
That distinction does not matter under the FPPC regulations.
Yeah, if you have to ask, better to accuse.
Okay, so bringing it back to the council. We have a couple of options here. One is we can approve everything that is in this budget grant amount, or we can take them individually. Mr. Murphy?
Yeah, it was recommended to do at least this one separately so that he could come back and participate in discussion regarding the other grants. The other thing on the agenda is potentially, without his participation, would be to put a cap on the amount. If the council wishes to do that, I'm just picking a number, but for the sake of conversation, say you choose $100,000 annually, and that's what the cumulative amount of all the grants would be. And then we could budget for that amount, plan on it going forward. You could also choose to not put a cap on it, and then we deal with what we're dealing with this year, where you've got some folks asking for, $70,000, $100,000, some asking for $5. So it would be an opportunity to kind of know what we could budget for, and then plan on that going forward, if that's what you choose to do.
But the cap would not be in effect until when?
No, it'd be on this next budget cycle.
On the next budget cycle?
Yeah, so right now.
Next time anybody comes up with grants, it's going to be within that cap.
Would be, yeah,
We go
so
to
you
that
could have one person ask for 100,000 and then, 5 others ask for some smaller amount, but somebody's going to not get what they want. So, ultimately, that's the thing with the cap. Unless you choose to exceed the cap, which is another option, but for purposes of budgeting and planning, the cap would be a good tool.
Okay. So I think if I understand this correctly, we have to address the Atterdag grant request first, take a motion on that one, and then once that's approved or rejected or changed, whatever happens, then we can bring Mr. Brown back in?
Yes, that's true. And then the other action you would need to take in Mr. Brown's absence would be whether you want to set a cap on total grant amounts and make a motion for that amount.
But with him back here?
No, because that could affect the Atterdag amount.
I'll get it.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, makes sense.
I am not a fan of
Yes.
caps because when times are good, when we have a surplus, when things are wonderful, then there's more that you could share and help out. Almost every single one of these organizations is very, very, very worthy. And this is really disheartening that you every year you give, and the one year that we're facing a crisis, the state's facing a crisis, the city's underwater, we have a deficit, and if you don't fund entirely, then there's something, then you're bad. And it's really, really disheartening to try and to give, and then when you don't have the money to give, then you're in trouble. I'm having a really hard time with this. Solvang Danish Days is going to be one day.
That's
for $20,000. Solvang is going to be one day. I'll put on 3 golf tournaments between now and September, and raise $20,000.
Good. I'll play.
I'm dead serious, and I've done this before with other groups that have asked for money.
Yeah.
Let's get out and make some money. Let's get out and raise some money. I'm more than willing to help. I did it for 22 different organizations for 18 years. But it's really tough to, I mean, the senior center goes from 450 to 520, and we're hurting seniors by only giving $450,000.
Call this a cap, can we just set a budget number instead of calling it a cap?
Or a percentage.
Let's call it a budget number.
I don't want a cap.
Or just not put a cap on.
For this year's budget.
I mean, alternatively, you could just approve a number for each organization this year, and that will total an amount for the budget, rather than set a cap.
Right, well, that's the thing, the idea of a cap would be, again, you've got that fixed amount. Okay, we're gonna give them 5, we're gonna give them 7, we're gonna give them 25, whatever the math ends up, that's how much you have left to divide among the remaining group, but I understand the difficulty with the cap. But again, like I said, it gives some certainty into the budget process.
Well, let's define a budget number as opposed to a cap, because a cap sounds permanent and it's fixed. But what we need to do is find some money, right, somewhere. So, just to be clear, if we use the Measure U money for everything that we need to do we still have a deficit projection?
Particularly for not next year, but the year after we do.
No.
Really?
So,
But Measure U funds were not intended to be grants.
Right.
correct. But they could be applied and backfilled where we have budget shortfalls, correct? In certain areas.
Yes.
Okay, and if we were to do that, I'm trying to do math in my head, it's about $1.5 million after we earmarked $500,000 or $450,000 for sheriff this year, correct?
Seniors, yes.
Senior.
And we have one more year on the sheriff's contract, correct?
Oh, I got 3 more.
I'm sorry, excuse me, three more years. Okay.
But we have other things we can maneuver. So let me ask a quick question. Actually, I'll save that question for later. So I'll just make a suggestion. Why don't we put the budget line item at 200,000 instead of 69, and we don't call it a cap?
I won't vote for that,
Why?
because you're not addressing any of the individuals. You're just coming up with a number.
Right.
That doesn't make any sense.
I'll give you some context. The last 3 years, we've given away, the smallest amount that we've given away in grant funding was $262,000.
And what we've heard is for the last 2 or 3 years, the general fund's been red.
And 8 years ago, we gave away $1.5 million.
And we have $1.5 million. No, we didn't. Oh, 8 years ago?
I'm generalizing, but
Yeah. The last 3 years, we've given away, on average, we've given away 316, 317, and 262,000.
Okay.
Giveaway, if we're 10% of our budget deficit projection, you guys cut our recommendation down 80%. So I don't see the
Let's go back to
logic.
how we got the deficit down to where it is now. We've
Yeah.
got people that aren't working. We can't get the pavement done.
No, we didn't lay
We have a
anybody
lot of
off. We are
capital
not hiring.
projects. Right.
We're not hiring.
So we don't.
Or let's
makes
be
it
really
another
clear
burden
what
on the
those
rest of the
jobs
staff.
are. They're working that way now.
All right, let's do this officially. First, before Mr. Brown comes back in here, the question of Adderdag's amount in here. Do you approve it or want to change it?
I'd like to change it.
Ms. Arona?
You're leaving it up to me.
We have the money. They just told us we have the money in Measure U.
Well, it's not, yeah, but it's not going to be up to us. You know, there is a committee that oversees it. They have to be on board. We can't just disregard what, they're going to
What
recommend
Wendy
about
also told us is none of the capital improvement projects are in this. So we don't have the money if we're going to get anything else done in this city.
You can't use the services dollars for capital projects, right?
Okay.
The language in the measure made some recommendations. It did not say you could not do these other things. And it also, I checked with Mr. Fleischman, when the discussion from the Measure U committee came out with the idea that it would only be used for new things, and he said there's nothing in there that obligates it. Ultimately, it's a general fund with the requirement based on the ordinance and the ballot language to have a citizen oversight committee make recommendations to council. There's nothing binding in their recommendations.
Yeah, but my point is that what is the point on appointing a committee and, relying on them to oversee a budget and make recommendations and be a voice for the community if, we're going to be making those decisions without even getting their input on it. I want to, contribute to these organizations. They all are great parts of our community, but I also don't want to jump and dispose of money that we haven't discussed with a committee that was appointed to do that very thing.
Agreed. Okay.
But what I am wondering is, I would love to leave the door open for certain organizations when, we can collaborate with them or sponsor certain events or certain things that are specific. It's very different when they come and say, hey, we need an X amount of money, for this organization in general versus, hey, we want you to help us sponsor the night concert on Friday night on Danish Days, for example.
That was a big part of the conversation that we had in the committee was event-specific funding versus just, here's $40,000.
Right.
Right.
I like that, I like it better that way, especially with the chamber.
Yeah, and the chamber isn't even part of this right now.
So do we take your recommendation then?
Okay, so Mr. Clark said he would approve the way it is right now.
Adderdag, well, we're talking about Adderdag.
We got to get Adderdags and then talk about the cap, and then we can get Mr. Brown back in here. Your choice, Mr.
Okay, I will, I would accept the 10, yeah, I would approve the 10 grand for Adderdag at Home.
Okay, and I will also. Okay, I thought we just went through, okay. I'll make the motion that we accept the Adderdag at Home proposed amount.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark?
Yes.
Councilmember Claudia Rona?
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Rona?
I would like more, but I'm going to say yes.
And Mayor Pro Tem Brown absent. Mayor Infante?
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Okay, so now we need a question on, do we want a cap on grant funds for next year?
Can we change the language?
To?
Do we want to itemize the budget value for the grant fund for next year?
Itemize the budget.
As a dollar amount, not a cap.
How do we do that?
Just allot $200,000 for grant funding.
Isn't, okay, it's not a cap, just an amount. Is that a motion?
I'll make it a motion.
Do I have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second.
I'll make a motion for $175,000.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark?
No.
Councilmember Claudia Rona?
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Rona?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown absent. Mayor Infante?
No.
Motion fails.
Can I ask a question then? This is really more directed at staff. Can we let's roll back the clock a little bit. We approved $450,000 for the senior center construction project, not operations. But there was a moment where we entertained that value and that commitment, not changing the commitment, that we would structure that in payments. And if we could work with the senior center to determine if payments could be structured over multiple fiscal years, but in a compressed window, so that they can, they're not inhibiting their project timeline or schedule or the committed dollars. Could we explore that?
The contract's already been signed for the lump sum, 30 days after groundbreaking.
Yes, understood. But we committed the dollars. We've pledged that. Can
We
we?
pledged that.
Can we structure a payment in retro?
And the agreement that was signed committed us to paying it in one lump sum, not spread out over multiple years.
Have we asked them?
I have not had that conversation with them recently, no. I know the discussion was had beforehand, and again, they're borrowing money, or the money that they don't have in hand would need to be loaned to them at a rate. And so the money, if it's spread out over years, then would lose some buying power. So that was one of the advantages of doing it as a lump sum. It gives them better ability to extend the project without borrowing money until later.
At this point, I'd
I
like to.
don't think they're borrowing money. We explored that too. We couldn't loan the money because they can't take on debt.
No, I don't believe that was, there were some difficulties with us loaning them the money. There was some thought about us being, instead of them having to borrow the money from a financial institution, the city could provide that float essentially, but there was issues with gift of public funds and some other things that were complicating the matter.
Question one in my mind is, why are we off on this particular subject? We were supposed to be addressing whether we want to have a.
Yeah, because it could also relieve our current budget
Well, if we don't,
by a couple $100,000.
if we don't put a cap on, then we can do whatever we think is necessary at the time the grants come back, or whatever you want to do, or potentially could do with this particular amount of money. But at this point in time, I'd like to make the motion we do not make a cap on the grants.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Claudia Aruna.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Aruna.
No.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown absent. Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-1.
Okay, so we may bring Councilmember Brown back in now.
He's at the Lansby.
He went for a beer. He'll be back. Okay. So we've settled on Atterdag and the cap. So now we are going to address all of these individually or as a group without the Atterdag. And that's the decision at this point in time on how you want to do this.
I thought it was a group.
Well, we need to go individual since we've already started on that path. That would be my motion.
Oh, then I can take, I'm sorry to interrupt, but, so if I don't like one group, I can take that money and vote for it to be put somewhere else, and we can move some shells around. Okay.
So we don't have, just to bring up Councilmember Brown, we don't have a cap. We have approved $10,000 for Atterdag.
So, do I have a motion on how you want to proceed with the remaining budget amounts in these grant requests?
I just made a motion that we would proceed individually.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
You're going to start with me on that one? No.
Councilmember Clark.
No.
Mayor Infante.
No.
Motion. Councilmember Claudia Aruna.
Yes.
Councilmember Elizabeth Aruna.
Yes.
Motion fails 3-2.
So I'm going to try a motion that we accept these as they stand right now, because this was what the ad hoc committee decided we could manage. But I do appreciate Mr. Clark's idea of putting on a golf tournament or something to make some money, and I would be glad to help. But the motion is that we approve all of these as they exist right now. Do I have a second?
Yes.
And
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
excuse me, sorry. And make sure that you include the requirements in the table for providing receipts for
Thank
each
you.
one.
So accepting the table with all of the the requirements that are put into it, all of the amounts that are put into it, as was recommended by the ad hoc committee.
So I'm bothered by that. How can we accept that if there's already conditions on the details? We know for sure that somebody hasn't provided the,
Now, this is for next year. What you're looking at here is for next year. That's what we're approving. That was last year.
well, she's saying that for last year's money, if they're not qualified if they haven't provided us receipts. Is that what you're saying?
They should be providing us everything we need by June 1st.
But that's last year. That's not
That's
these
for-
budget requests.
So June 1st, we should have everything for 23, 24.
Right. But this budget request here on page, whatever the heck this is,
82 of the agenda.
82, thank you, is for 24, 25.
That's correct.
Correct.
So that's what the motion is to accept these grant funding amounts as suggested by the ad hoc committee, including the requirements for providing that information.
And if we don't receive the requirements that were specified for 23, 24, we can bring that back to council on June 10th, and you guys can decide at that time, if we didn't get the information, what you would do with the funding going forward for 24, 25.
Okay.
So it's conditional. That's what we're approving.
No, you got 2 years in here, because you're talking about the stuff for 23, 24.
Right,
Only.
but Ms. Arona's, I think her question was, if they don't provide us the required information, would they be eligible for grant funding in the future year of 24, 25? Is that correct?
Yes, because to be very clear, we have made a requirement for certain grant funds for them to show us how the money was spent.
Right.
To therefore provide proof of payment and proof of receipts, correct? So if you, and that would be a disqualifier if you were not providing those to us, because everyone else, in theory, has complied. So I don't feel like we should be in the position to have to approve money for someone who has not complied when others have.
So we're not approving money for this year. It's for next year. And so if they haven't provided what's necessary this year, they get no money. But if they've got a grant that's accepted here and they provide the information, next year they get the money.
And if they don't, it all goes to the senior center.
And
I
they
like
have
that
to
idea.
provide that, just to be clear, they have to provide that by the end of this week. Is that correct? But you're asking us to approve today for next year,
What
when
you're
they could
approving
be
today
disqualified.
Is to put it into the budget and come forward on June 10th.
Okay, here's a question though. So not everybody that's in this list has fulfilled all the requirements to qualify for these grants?
Only one.
Correct.
Only one has fulfilled all of the requirements. Is that what we're
One
hearing?
has not.
Only one has not.
Two? Thought you got everything, Randy.
No. Well, not for the full amount of one. So there's 2 applicants that have not fulfilled their full grant requirement of providing receipts for the full amount of money. And we have partials on both of them. And they were told by June 1st, we need everything for the 23, 24 monies.
That makes sense to everybody? Ms.
Just
Murphy.
to make one more statement, so should they be qualified for this year's funding if they didn't meet the qualifications last year, or in the year that will end in 5 days?
Interesting question. Not sure it was asked when they were presenting this for this year, for next year. Go ahead, Mr. Murphy. You want to say?
So I was going to say a couple things. First of all, I think Wendy covered it very well. What tonight is we're asking council, and based on the motion, to utilize the proposed column of $69,959 or $659. That amount will be put in the budget, so that increases that deficit. So when we come back on June 10th, we'll have a budget. Ideally, will be balanced if the Measure U committee agrees to the request that we will have for them at their meeting tomorrow. And at that time, we'll also present information and identify whether or not these two outstanding grantees fulfilled their obligation in terms of the 23-24 grants. At that time, the council can then decide whether or not they want to provide them the funds next year, maybe give them a little additional time to comply, whatever. There's some room. Basically, it's a council decision. The grant requirements were outlined in the contract everybody signed. We talked about it at last year's meeting to a much lesser degree. But obviously that confusion has led us, staff, to discuss ways to overcome that difficulty, and that is to have, for anybody who will be receiving funds from council or from the city this year, we will have a kind of a grant 101 process for anybody that will be applying for grants in future years, so that we don't have this problem.
So, Randy, sorry, but
Conditions on, if you don't attend the workshop, maybe we'll have 2 workshops. If you don't attend either workshop, then we won't even accept your grant.
You get your card signed.
Right. So the point is, we're trying to make this as simple as possible. It's really not that difficult. People are asking, most of our grantees complied 100%. No issues, no problems. There are a couple that were difficult, mostly due to misunderstanding or miscommunication. We worked through some of the more significant ones, but there's still a couple that are out there, and we'll hopefully resolve all this going forward.
May I ask
So-
one last question? I'm sorry.
couple issues before we. The challenges that I have right now, guys, is you're not giving us all the information. We don't know who hasn't complied, right?
Yes, we do.
We do.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear it.
Well,
We didn't announce it publicly.
you don't embarrass them in public.
Okay, you're not giving us all the information.
We're trying to avoid embarrassing them, so I don't think it's best that it be discussed. Trust staff that we're handling it. That would be my suggestion.
I have a quick question. Is taking the Measure U money robbing Peter to pay Paul?
Say that again?
Taking the Measure U money and moving it around, isn't that 6 one, that doesn't the other?
No, I mean, the Measure U funds were there. Again, it is a general fund. It has some
Earmark.
things that were said in the ballot language that some voters relied on to approve it, and we're doing our best to comply with that direction. Ultimately, it's a council's decision. I mean, you could, spend it on things that were obviously legal, but not in mind, that were identified in the ballot language, not recommended. Obviously, people have long memories when it comes to those kinds of things. So I would suggest that we comply as closely as possible to the wishes of the voters.
I think it's not really robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's really more half dozen of the other. It's general fund money that we can use. We have an oversight committee to make a recommendation. We haven't heard from them yet. We should. But it's ultimately the council's decision how we spend that money in general fund expenditure. So to be clear again, I'll say it again. We have $1.5 million to work with, correct?
We have currently, we have $1.9 million in Measure U money. The Measure U committee has suggested that we spend 1.68 million of that. I don't have my notes, but it was for a rec master plan. It was for $200,000 for traffic. There was
Senior Center,
450 for the senior center,
100 for the sheriff contract,
500 for the sheriff contract.
pothole repair.
Pothole report, I think there was a
250.
250 for pothole repair. So that is, that was from the 1.9 million, and it went up. Back then it was 1.7, but every month we get more money. And that doesn't include the 24-25 revenue that we should get from Measure U.
Is the 450 for the senior center that is being proposed in Measure U for the new facilities? Yeah, so that's not for programming, that's for facilities.
Yes.
But I have to add, that mindset of taking this money to do this is what got so many municipalities and this state into the hole that it's in.
We've already done that. We already did that with sheriff, and we're doing that with senior center, so you're...
Yeah, and the only reason why it's in a different fund is because there is an oversight committee. And when we ask the auditors about how do you see best that this money go into the general fund, or do we create a new fund? And the auditors recommended that we put it in its separate fund for transparency and tracking purposes.
Great.
Otherwise, it would be in the general fund. And it would have its own separate line items, but with all the other line items in the general fund, it would get lost. I mean, we would know it's there, but the public wouldn't know
I
where
think,
it was.
yeah, I think, unfortunately, I think we're just being, we don't have the full picture because we haven't seen the readout from the Measure U funding or the recommendation from the committee, but we've actually already dictated to the committee how we're going to spend roughly $1 million of those dollars by recommending or asking them to go along with the $500,000 for sheriff contract and $450,000 for senior center. We made those decisions on this council because we knew we had those dollars. We still have, now I'm just to do fast math again, we still have $1 million to spend, right? And we can dictate again.
No.
We are meeting with the Measure U committee tomorrow.
I know. Here's the other issues that I have,
Point of
guys.
order. Point of order. There's a motion on the floor presently that's been seconded.
Is there?
Yeah.
I don't.
You made a set.
There
you
was
made-
a second.
I think Robert.
No.
I don't know if anybody seconded. Did
I'm sorry.
Mr. Clark, did you second that? Yes. Ah, there was a person to second to just accept this as it stands with those requirements, sorry.
Can I amend the motion? Because I think we could revisit whatever is approved today after we hear from the Measure U committee.
Well, at this point in time, if it's in a first and a second, don't we need just a vote? And then we can talk about whether you want to recommend a change?
So parliamentary procedure rules, now would be the time to amend the motion. Formally, it would be a motion to amend, which would need its own second, and you'd vote on that first and then the original motion.
Okay.
Or you can accept a friendly amendment, though I think we'd want some clarification on the form of the amendment.
It'll be a motion to amend the motions on the table right now, which is to revisit, if we were to approve, to revisit the grant funding after we hear from the Measure U committee and firmly understand how much available money is left for next year.
Do I have a second for that? Motion fails for lack of a second. I think we need to go back and have a vote, please, on the first motion.
This is a motion for clarity to approve as a group the remaining grant requests other than Atterdaggett Home, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's for the proposed
with the
amounts
stipulations.
with the requirements listed in the table.
And to advance it to the preliminary budget for consideration with the budget at that time. Councilmember Claudia Arona.
No.
Councilmember Elizabeth Arona.
No.
Councilmember Clark.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Brown.
Yes.
Mayor Infante.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2.
All right.
Make a
You want to make a comment?
Just real quick, I want to thank the committee for the hard work and the hard decisions that they've had to make. I appreciate everything that people have done here. I wish there was more, and I hope that we can help with any fundraising endeavors. Thank you.
Absolutely. We belong to a couple of organizations that probably potentially can help, so we'll work on that. All right, at this point in time, are there any council closing comments?
No.
Okay, in that case, I call the meeting closed at 9:01.